a week. I'm sorry in advance. Well, not even in advance because it's already happened, but I mean, I wish that I had some intro music that kind of fit the mood better for this week. I feel like that intro music is just too hype for the subject matter of today's episode, which is the ruling of Breonna Taylor's case, and that came in on Wednesday. That has made headlines and has dominated the news this week since the jury found one of the former Louisville police officers who stormed into Breonna Taylor's apartment in March during a botched raid and killed Miss Breonna Taylor, who was a black medical worker, a black EMT. Killed her for no reason, just cold blood. Before we jump further down into what happened, I just want to ask you how your week has been. If aside from what has been going on in the news, it has been good, I want to say I'm happy for you. And that I really hope your following week will continue the trend of positivity. If it's been bad and if this news has really gotten you down, I don't blame you, and it's okay. But just know we still have a fight to fight. And this just shows that we have a long way to go still. It shows a lot of things, and I'm trying to be positive about it. It's very easy to be negative about it, and I'm going to try my best to not be that way during this little rant I'm about to go on about this case. But, you know, when you're in the midst of some pretty negative times, and when a case like this comes down to a decision as unjust as this one, it's pretty hard to be positive. So I don't blame you, and bear with me through this episode. I hope you learned something. I did some research for it. And so anyways, here we go. So as I said, Breonna Taylor was murdered back in March during a botched raid on her apartment, which has led to wide-scale demonstrations in the spring and the summer as the case drew more attention. Most notably in the NBA bubble, many players have spoken out for Breonna Taylor and their desire to see the police officers that killed Breonna Taylor brought to justice, right? Well, on Wednesday, a grand jury indicted the former police officer, one of the former police officers, on wanton endangerment for his actions during the raid. No charges were announced against the other two officers who fired shots. No one was charged for causing Miss Taylor's death. What is wanton endangerment? Wanton endangerment basically means there were bullets who pierced the walls of the apartment that could have injured other inhabitants of that complex. So the neighbors of Breonna Taylor could have been injured. Therefore, one of the cops was indicted on wanton endangerment. Or wanton endangerment. I don't know how to pronounce it. You know, if you're a regular of this show, you know I cannot pronounce certain words. I apologize, but it's wanton or wanton endangerment. Brett Hankinson, a detective at the time, fired into the sliding glass, patio door, and window of Miss Taylor's apartment, both of which were covered with blinds, which is in violation of a department policy that requires officers to have a line of sight. So there's already one thing, okay? He is the only one of the three officers who is dismissed from the force, with a termination letter saying that he showed an extreme indifference to the value of human life. It seems to me that they agree that some crazy shit went down that night in March in Miss Taylor's apartment. What has happened before this indictment, but after the murder? Well, Breonna Taylor's family was paid $12 million in a wrongful death lawsuit. $12 million were paid. So the police have admitted that there was a wrongful death. But has anybody gone to jail? No. And only one police officer was released from the force after he showed reckless endangerment, apparently. Which he did. That's not a lie. But what about the other two? They were there. Now, what happened on that night in March? Well, these three cops, plain-clothed cops, had a knock warrant. Not a no-knock warrant, like some people have been saying on Facebook and, the likes of Turning Point USA, which I've talked about previously. They want you to believe they had a no-knock warrant, so they could just bust down the fucking door and start shooting. No. They had a knock warrant, wherein which you have to knock and say, "Police, open up." Nobody answers the door. Knock again. "We are the police. Open the door." That is what a knock warrant is. What did they do? And what did the other 12 witnesses that night, who are all alive, claim? There are 12 witnesses that claimed that they knocked on the door. The police officer, plain-clothed police officers, knocked on the door. And that's it. They just knocked on the door. And they did not say that they are the police and that you need to open the door. Now, there's one witness that said they knocked on the door and they said once, "Police, open up." They said that one time. In the middle of the night, when Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend were in that apartment sleeping, they knocked on the door, and according to the one witness that corroborated this story, one witness said that the plainclothed police officers said, "Police, open up." Right after they knocked once, then they kept knocking. They did not say, "Police, open up," after the first time. That's one witness. There's 12 other witnesses that said they never heard the police say anything other than just a knock. Okay? All right. Now, why were they there? Why did they even have a warrant for the place? Well, the police had been investigating two men who they believed were selling drugs out of a house that was far from Miss Taylor's home. But a judge had also signed a warrant allowing the police to search Miss Taylor's residence because the police said they believed that one of the men had used her apartment to receive packages. Miss Taylor had been dating that man on and off for several years, but had recently severed ties with him, according to her family's lawyer. Now, we have to remember, this lawyer is the lawyer that won the wrongful death lawsuit against the Louisville Police Department. Okay, now that we remember that, let's keep going. Miss Taylor and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, had been in bed, but got up when they heard loud banging at the door. Okay, we just talked about that. Mr. Walker said he and Miss Taylor both called out, asking who was at the door. Mr. Walker later told the police he feared it was Miss Taylor's ex-boyfriend trying to break in. Huh. After the police broke the door off its hinges, Mr. Walker fired his gun once, striking Sergeant Mattingly in the thigh. The police responded by firing several shots, striking Miss Taylor 5 times. One of the 3 officers on the scene, Detective Brett Hankinson, who has since been fired, shot 10 rounds blindly into the apartment. Mr. Walker told investigators that Miss Taylor coughed and struggled to breathe for at least 5 minutes after she was shot. 5 minutes! According to the Louisville Courier-Journal. An ambulance on standby outside the apartment had been told to leave about an hour before the raid, which is counter to standard practice. Counter to standard practice, which this means that the police acted, the 3 officers acted below the standard of the police department. As officers called an ambulance back to the scene and struggled to render aid to their colleague, Miss Taylor was not given any medical attention whatsoever. It was not until 12:47 a.m., about 5 minutes after the shooting, that the emergency personnel realized she was seriously wounded after her boyfriend called 911. I don't know what's happening, Mr. Walker said on recorded call to 911. Someone kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend. Miss Taylor received no medical attention for more than 20 minutes after she was struck, the Courier-Journal reported, citing dispatch logs. The Jefferson County coroner told the Courier-Journal that Miss Taylor most likely died less than a minute after she was shot and could not have been saved. While the department had received court approval for a no-knock entry, the orders were changed before the raid to knock and announce, meaning that the police had to identify themselves. Okay? No drugs were found in the apartment, a lawyer for Mr. Walker said. Jamarcus Glover is the name of Miss Taylor's ex-boyfriend whose alleged packages led the police to her door that night. And he was arrested on August 27th in possession of drugs, according to a charging document. He told the Courier-Journal that Miss Taylor had no involvement in the drug trade. The police are trying to make it out to be my fault and turning the whole community out here, making it look like I had brought this to Breonna's door. Okay. So, what does this all mean? What does this all point to? Well, I mean, I don't even have to explain any further. If you have any sense whatsoever, it is apparent that these police officers acted below the standard that is set by their department. They killed a woman who had no involvement in any sort of drug trafficking trade. They had a knock and announce warrant and continued as if they had a no-knock warrant. Now, imagine you are Miss Taylor's boyfriend, Mr. Kenneth Walker, and you hear this knock at the door, and you know that this other man, Jamarcus Glover, might want to break back into his ex-girlfriend's apartment for whatever reason. And you hear a knock at the door. Now, imagine the door is knocked off its hinges. You start firing because you know that somebody could very well be trying to cause you harm. So you begin firing. You look and you see there's 3 men that you don't recognize at all, who are all white. And they begin firing back. They do not say they're police. They're in plain clothes. What are you supposed to do? If you are a pro-Second Amendment, if you're a conservative and you're pro-Second Amendment, you should be on Mr. Kenneth Walker's side on this one. I don't understand why anybody would defend the police officers in this situation from any ideological walk of life. It makes no sense to me. If you're pro-Second Amendment, Mr. Walker exercised his Second Amendment perfectly. This is like a conservative's wet dream. In the sense of anybody who has a gun, who wants to use it, it basically wants to protect their home. That is the reason why you own a firearm. That's why a vast majority of people in America own firearms, to protect their home. That's the only time they ever want to use it. So when 3 men in plain clothes break down your door and and are threatening you by breaking down your front door, you damn well have a right to shoot those people. That is what the Second Amendment is about. But if you're a conservative and you are defending the cops and saying how Mr. Kenneth Walker should have exercised some restraint because those were cops and how dare he shoot a cop in the thigh, then that is your problem, and you're choosing to ignore other facts of this case. It makes no sense to me. And now Breonna Taylor was caught in this crossfire because of the incompetence of the police. And did any of them get indicted on account of her death? No, that did not happen. And that's not going to happen. But is that the grand jury's fault? No, that is not the grand jury's fault. Whose fault is it? Let's take a walk down judicial lane, shall we? Okay, I will be your tour guide on this excursion down judicial lane. The grand jury just makes the decision based upon the charges presented to them by the district attorney of the state of Kentucky in this case. The district attorney gets recommended which charges to place on a case or against people in a case by the police precinct that took care of the investigation. Do you see any hole in that logic? Any holes whatsoever? It's almost as if this entire process is one big hole, because when you have the police department investigating their own, they're going to want to protect their own and not recommend the district attorney to file for certain charges. Now, I'm not sure if the district attorney can just charge people within a case without a recommendation by the police department. I'm not sure if that's possible. I'm assuming you can. So I'm not saying that the district attorney is off scot-free here, but the police department obviously is not going to recommend shit in terms of murder or assault even. But wanton endangerment, okay, we'll throw them that bone, right? This sets the precedent that any police officer can bust down your door in plain clothes, shoot you, and get away with it. That's what this sets the precedent for. And Breonna Taylor deserves justice. Now, the dead don't care about justice. They're dead. All right? But in her name, people across this country, specifically African American men and especially women, deserve to be able to sleep in their bed and not worry about anybody knocking down their fucking door and killing them. Now, it has been commonly thought that Breonna Taylor was sleeping in her bed when she was shot and killed. She was actually standing in the hallway. That doesn't change shit, okay? That doesn't change anything other than the fact that she wasn't in her bed sleeping peacefully. She was in the hallway because she was woken up by the banging on her door by the 3 cops who barged in. But nonetheless, she was killed wrongfully. She had nothing to do. She was a 26-year-old EMT. She saved, I can imagine, multiple lives in her lifetime. And it is ridiculous to me that cops in this country believe that they have the right to make these types of decisions, in the sense we have a justice system for a fucking reason, right? Yeah, we do. What the cop's job is, a cop is a glorified Uber driver. That is what a cop is. In this respect, what are you supposed to do if you're the cop? Take the people who have done wrong, bring them to jail so they can be tried in court. That is the whole point of what a cop should do in a criminal situation. Now, obviously, when they're getting shot at, things are a little different. But when you knock down someone's door wrongfully and shoot at people who have nothing to do with the drug investigation that you are conducting, and you kill one of them, you are not doing your job correctly. You're not. You're not. And guess what? Mr. Kenneth Walker, has no charges pressed against him. The state of Kentucky sided with him in his trial. So he's off. Nothing's happening to him. He got hit a couple times. I believe he was in the hospital. But they ruled that he was acting in self-defense, which he was. And if that pisses you off, I don't know what else to tell you. He acted in self-defense. It's 100% true. And this goes back to my point. The cops, in this case, and the cops that we have seen throughout this entire BLM resurgence this year, believe that they are above the law. If you're like me, you grew up believing criminals thought they were above the law. It is the cops who are, and it is becoming blatantly clear that that is what is happening. Criminals don't believe that they are above the law. What they do, criminals that truly are criminals, not like how many people on the far right are trying to frame Breonna Taylor as a fucking criminal when she's not. I mean true criminals who do fucking heinous shit. Those people don't believe they're above the law. Those people try to find ways around it. Cops believe they are above it because they will supersede the law that they are sworn to enforce and adhere to due to their ego and due to their lack of fucking training in this country. It is not their job to go around just killing people and believing that that will solve whatever problem that they are currently in. And I'm just going to fucking say it. I don't think that reform is going to work in this country. It doesn't seem like it will, because any sort of reform, it's just like what happened in Minneapolis. They decided, oh, we're going to disband the police so we can reform it, right? What happened? That got shot down. It was basically all for a media stunt, just so people can stop protesting in the city. So what do I think should happen, you may ask? Well, I think we need to start from the ground up. I think police unions are way too strong in this country. I preach balance on this show, and it is apparent that the balance of power in terms of unions is skewed heavily in the side of militarization and law enforcement. There are a lot of issues with the police, and reform, incremental, small-scale reform isn't going to change shit. Because all that incremental change does is allow for the people who want to get around those incremental changes to get around those incremental changes. It gives them more time to adapt, to find ways, holes, loopholes in those changes to keep doing whatever the fuck they were doing before. And in the end, nothing fucking changes. When people do wrong, as these cops did, change has to be swift and it has to be severe so that way people don't do these acts again. That's the whole fucking point. And you might be saying, well, that sounds pretty conservative for you to say that, enforcement of law has to be swift. No, I'm not talking about enforcement of law. I'm talking about the changing of the police and how they operate. There has to be a third party that oversees law enforcement proceedings and processes and holds them accountable, because they can't hold themselves accountable. No company, no school district, no entity, no institution in the United States or really in the world can be trusted to hold themselves accountable and check themselves. That just doesn't fucking exist. And if you think it does, then you're living in a fantasy land. There has to be a third party who oversees cases of the police fucking up, to put it bluntly. That's what has to happen. That has to start it, at least. But it's been a sad week, and I've had a lot of things on my mind, and I'm sorry that if this episode ran a little long, and I'm sorry that it sounded like I was rambling, because I really am. I'm perturbed. I'm very, very distraught over this news, especially when you pair this with the election coming up. It really feels like the timing of this. I can't help but feel like the timing of this is supposed to, like whoever is in charge of this case in terms of time, in terms of scheduled this on purpose to be close to the election, so that way there would be protests and people that are mad like me rising up again in Kentucky, a swing state, And those people who are in charge of the scheduling of this might be hoping that these protests sway people to vote for Trump because of all this quote-unquote destruction that will be coming to Louisville. Now, that very well may work. I don't fucking know. Or it may swing the other way. That's gonna be something we're gonna have to watch in the election. But nonetheless, Breonna Taylor deserved better. And like I said in the beginning, we have to keep going. And I know that this is a fucking meme at this point, that voting is going to just solve literally everything. You know, we got to vote. Voting. You got to vote in order to solve this issue, right? There's certain things that you can't vote on this year. Certain propositions that you may want to be on the ballot that just aren't there. Voting for Biden isn't going to solve this. It is possibly going to stop it from getting worse. Possibly. I'm not sitting here saying that it is for sure going to happen, but very well could. I don't know. I'm ignorant on that. And anybody says that they aren't, well, they're lying. And I don't really know what else to say, guys. I'm kind of at a loss for words now. I kind of said everything I wanted to. I'm like I said, I'm pretty upset, and you should be too if you are wanting to live in a country with a true justice system that doesn't cater to one segment of society over the rest of them. A justice system that protects their own over the protects justice. Because if you're not upset, then yeah, that just tells me a lot about you. Please follow the Closers Podcast on Instagram at the Closers Podcast, on Facebook at Closers Podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are the Closers Podcast. Quinn and I talked to one of his old friends who actually lives in Kentucky, Hopkinsville, Quinn's hometown, this past Wednesday. If you're interested in listening to that kind of more lighthearted comedic episode, please listen to that on any of our feeds. Quinn will be at you on Monday for Hang 10. I'm sure he'll be talking about this as well, along with some of the stuff from the NFL. And yeah, hopefully next week we'll have some lighter things to talk about. Have a great weekend, and try to stay up, and take care.